Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War. I'm at Petersburg National Battlefield today, standing in the sally port of battery number 5. This is one of 16 batteries, one of 55 artillery positions that made up the Dimmock Line, which surrounded Petersburg on 3 sides with a 10-mile front, or nearly 10-mile front, but only about 22,000 guys under the command of Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard defending the position. Most of the action, of course, has been taking place up to the north, with Ulysses S. Grant pushing his way through the heart of Virginia, trying to capture Richmond. But he's going to set his sights on Petersburg once he gets bogged down at Cold Harbor, just a few miles outside of the gates of Richmond, and can't quite get there. So he realizes if he can jump the James River and come down here to Petersburg and cut off the Confederate capital from the south, it will strangle their supply lines and force them to give up their position around the capital. Now, it's always struck me as kind of a major shift in strategy people don't talk about a whole lot, because remember, Grant starts the overland campaign thinking that it is Lee's army, not the Confederate capital, that is the objective. Where Lee goes, you shall go too, he tells George Gordon Meade. So that's why the overland campaign slugs out the way it does. But when he's so close to Richmond and he can't get at Lee, he's going to change the objective and try to kind of get at Lee sideways, try to get the Confederate capital sideways, or southwise anyway. So that's why he targets Petersburg. This portion of the Dimmock Line cut right through a 525-acre plantation known as Claremont, owned by Josiah Jordan. He and his family lived in a house that had been where this foundation now remains, and they had 22 enslaved people that worked this plantation. Their quarters were right behind the camera. In fact, those enslaved people were put to work among many others beginning in 1862 to start creating the Dimmock Line. But by the time the war starts knocking on the door of this property on June 15, 1864, the Jordans and their enslaved people had fled. The house is destroyed during the war. We don't know much about what life was like on this plantation as a result, but the Jordans did come back afterwards and choose to rebuild. The foundation here, as well as the Jordan family cemetery, bear testament to the presence of the civilians and the enslaved who were uprooted by war. Nearby, there's a wayside that tells the story, and it asks a great question. And I love this audience-centered approach the Park Service has been taking lately, although it's been controversial. How has history impacted your family's story? By asking questions like that, it's a way to invite people to think about their connections to those people and places that they're seeing when they're out on the battlefield. Grant's going to get the 18th Corps under Baldy Smith from the Army of the James, team them up with a 2nd Corps under Winfield Scott Hancock from the Army of the Potomac, slip them down here toward the Petersburg defenses, and then order an attack. And they're able to get into position pretty effectively, but there's poor communication between the Army commanders, poor communication between the Corps commanders, not a clear sense of urgency from Grant. And so on the 15th of June, 1864, as the attack begins, it doesn't start till about 7 p.m. Federals are going to be able to successfully break through right here, but they run out of daylight and don't push forward, which would have taken them right into Petersburg, as lightly defended as it was. So really, there's just a perfect storm of poor communication, lack of aggressiveness, lack of daylight that turns this first engagement at Petersburg into one of the great lost opportunities of the war, and particularly bittersweet one at that, knowing that the siege is going to last 9 months and 18 days. Oh, what could have been if they'd been able to end it right here. I also want to give a shout out to Petersburg National Battlefield, because they do a lot to try to keep you oriented in the overall story of the siege, which of course lasts for more than 9 months. Lots of action over that time, and it can be tough to keep track of it all. And so Petersburg's trying to constantly keep you oriented. It's such a complex story, so many moving parts, so misunderstood, and so it's a huge interpretive challenge, and I think that they do a great job of really kind of helping you stay situated in that larger story, and how it connects to the other parts of the story, what it means in the larger context, and of course how it's going to tie into the final days of the war after the breakthrough happens in April. The outside of Battery 5 is pretty impressive as a fortification. Federals are going to improve it once they get here and add on to it. But then also the Park Service has the Confederate Dimmock line, those original earthworks laid out. Now they knew by June of '64 these were not as strong as they could have been. Now, a quick little story. When I came here to Petersburg the first time, I brought my daughter. She's, at this point 5 years old, and she sees this, she's like, "Those are earthworks?" Super unimpressed. And she actually had me write a letter to the park superintendent saying, "Is there a place that you could show what earthworks really look like?" And of course there is elsewhere on the tour. Battery 5 is one of the coolest jewels in the Petersburg crown. It often gets overlooked by the crater, of course, but it's where the Park Service has its visitor center, because this is where that first action took place. It's a great place for you to start your visit as well. Great little walking trail, lots of things to see. Explore the museum that's here, explore the site, and of course, one really cool little thing we can tack on at the end of the visit. We have to take the path down around the front of Battery 5 to get there. One of the real treats of this battlefield is the Dictator, a 13-inch Seacoast mortar that was fired from this spot over the first 3 months of the siege. With a 20-pound bag of powder, this baby could shoot a 220-pound projectile almost 2.5 miles in a huge arcing pattern that could come in down behind enemy fortification. It could lob a shell an incredibly vast distance, but not especially practical weapon. Every time they'd fire it, it would damage its own firing platform. It could hit downtown, so it had a spook factor to that. But it doesn't have a huge impact on the overall waging of the battle here. Of course, artillery is one of the key stories here at Petersburg, so be sure to check out the exhibit in front of the visitor center that shows a variety of different artillery pieces that were used during the siege. Take some time, come south of the James, visit Petersburg, lots to explore and see, and you'll find it a worthwhile visit. I'm Chris Mackowski for Emerging Civil War at Battery 5 at Petersburg National Battlefield. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.